So, hello and welcome to another episode of the Sliding Doors podcast. For those of you that haven't joined us before, it's a kind of look back at those what if moments in life, those sliding door moments in life, based around kind of three categories, as is tradition with kind of podcasts, and just a really good conversation with a variety of guests. And my guest today is the illustrious Jim Willis, who's going to introduce himself now.
Well, first of all, Rob, thanks for having me on today. My name's Jim. Me and you, Rob, go back a long way back to working at Primark when I had my student job there. But to kind of introduce myself and what I do now, so I'm now a senior lecturer at the UE Glenside campus, and I teach trainee healthcare students who are doing master's level degrees. So that's a mixture of nursing students, paramedics, and other students from healthcare settings.
Quite the departure from Primark. I'm sure we'll
you could say that, I suppose. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
So as is kind of tradition, Jim, our first category is all around kind of love and relationships. So what's your sliding door moment there?
Yeah, so I had to have a listen to your other podcasts to kind of draw together a good answer, an interesting answer for this one. And you can probably see over my shoulder there's a map of Ireland there, and that's because my current partner Gemma is Irish, and we met when I was studying. Well, when we were both studying at UE or UWE Bristol, and I kind of reflected on kind of what is a sliding doors moment. And I know some of your previous interviewees have talked about the film as a reference point.
Yeah.
But I think for me and Jem, there's multiple kind of sliding door moments really. So Jem comes from a very rural village in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And then as I'm sure you know, I'm from Bristol originally, but I didn't grow up in Bristol. So my parents got offered job opportunities in the Midlands. So I grew up fairly rurally in Worcestershire, which is only realistically famous for being in Shrek the Third. There's not really much else going on there, to be honest with you.
What a claim to fame that is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I remember rightly, I think it's where Arthur's hiding out and Shrek goes there to collect him to basically put him on the throne. And that's basically as interesting as life is out there. So in terms of kind of our journey to meeting each other, there's like numerous sliding door moments along the way. So from Jem's perspective, she was unsure of her career choice. So initially was thinking, did she want to go into something like primary school teaching? But eventually worked out that she, has good rapport and likes working with children. And so actually now is a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital in Bristol. And kind of my journey to meeting her at university is quite convoluted as well. So I did my first degree when we were both working together at Primark, and that was in biomedical science. And that experience of doing that degree kind of really burned me out, particularly the final year dissertation. And I remember talking to my parents at the time and saying, I can't realistically see myself ever doing anything like this again, because it took that much mentally out of me. Then after graduating from my degree, I left Primark, as you know, and then I went to go and work in the hospital in Weston-super-Mare as a lab scientist there for the NHS, but didn't really feel particularly fulfilled in that career. Yeah. And so began exploring opportunities for kind of a career change. And I wasn't 100% certain what I wanted to do. So I was looking at maybe training to be a paramedic, maybe training or trying to do the entrance exams to go to medical school. But I ended up coming across the career path, which I do now and which I teach now, which is the NHS physician associate role. And it just so happened that the first year it was launched at UE was the same year that Jem started her nursing degree. And so so my cohort on my course, we used to go to the Students' Union for our lunches, simply because the canteen at Glenside campus, anyone who's ever been there, you'll know that it is absolutely rammed with healthcare students, and it's very much the nursing students sit together, the paramedic students sit together, and if you can find a spare couple of chairs, then that's as lucky as you're going to get. So we used to go to the students' union because it used to be a little bit more quiet, and so Jem was working in there behind the bar. And me and my best friend at the time, we used to play pool in there quite a lot, just to break up kind of lost time between lectures. And we got talking basically through that. But if I reflect upon the steps that were necessary to get to that point, well, Jem had to kind of take the leap of faith to leave her home in Ireland, to come over to the UK and study over here. I went from being in a position where I very much was not keen on the idea of going back to university to doing a complete 180 and ending up not just at university, but at the same university I went to for my undergrad. And then just by virtue of the fact that we used to kind of see each other in the same place, we got talking. So I often think, if all of those things hadn't have happened, they kind of merge into one kind of big sliding door moment. So if all of those things hadn't have happened, quite conceivably, me and Jem would never have met, and consequently wouldn't be together now. So that was what I had for kind of love and friendships, really. I was thinking, both of our journeys to get to this point where we're together, and we've been together for 3, it'll be 4 years next year. It made me think, God, we've had quite complicated journeys to get to where we are now.
There's a couple of things I want to pick up on there. So first of all, I didn't realize it was that long, and so that's blown my mind already. Again, like you say, to add context, me and Jim are good friends outside of this, so that does surprise me in terms of how quickly that's come around. But also, you're right in terms of what I find really interesting is, kind of how it is that kind of upon reflection where the domino effect that it takes for a big sliding door moment to happen. Like you say, that's a lot of small things that kind of all add up to one big thing, but actually there's a lot of things in play there in terms of, like you say, Gemma having to kind of make her own decision of following that career path. You and another thing I just wanted to touch on there as well is that bit of I can certainly relate around the uncertainty. You kind of go, I've done something like that before. I'm not sure I want to do that again. What should I do? I fully relate there in terms of, and you're aware, and obviously some of the listeners will be aware in terms of what I've described so far. But making that transition to HR, I never considered myself doing any sort of learning after I kind of left school and had done all that point. To me, that was over. And then picked it up, kind of 10 years later, and now I'm in HR. And like you say, that's a sliding door moment because it's led to kind of other opportunities. It's led to this. So, I fully relate there. And I think, the bit that really stands out for me is that whole domino effect, that kind of it's almost like the layers of an onion, isn't it? You kind of look at it and go, all these things have happened, like they will seem like quite small things at the time. Like you say, you make that decision to go somewhere purely based on kind of how busy another place is. You don't expect to kind of meet someone that way. You've just gone as a kind of a recreational thing, and that's turned into getting to know someone, a relationship. 3 or 4 years on, it's all those things. Is I think that's a fantastic share from my perspective.
It's a real cascade, and I can probably take it back one step further as well, certainly from my perspective, in that when it came to choosing a university to study at, initially I was very much torn between UWE Bristol and Oxford Brookes University, and I really couldn't decide between the pair of them. And ultimately what flipped it for me was the fact that although I wasn't living in Bristol at the time, I was familiar with Bristol as a place because most of my extended family live here. So, all of my mum's side of my family live here, my granddad, my uncle, my auntie, etc. And a large portion of my dad's side of my family live here. So even when we were living and I was growing up in Worcestershire, we would come back to Bristol an awful lot to see family and to go and watch football as well. But I won't bore you too much with that at this stage. But the decision to go to UWE, if I'd have flipped that around the other way and gone to Oxford Brookes University instead, then this whole relationship would never have happened. And similarly for Jem, her thought process of, leaving Ireland, coming to study over in England, studying particularly in Bristol, if she hadn't have gone on that journey, then again, we wouldn't have met each other. So yeah, that's our sliding door moment, I suppose you could say.
I think that's a fantastic share, mate. And moving swiftly on to our next category, and it's all around career and kind of work. Obviously, we've kind of touched on it already, but I think from certainly before we kind of get into your sliding door moment, I think it'd be really interesting from my perspective to hear kind of how you ended up in Primark in the first place. It seems that like half of Bristol end up in Primark, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And probably half my guests have been in Primark at some point at this stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for the listener and certainly for me, it would be interesting to see kind of how you end up there, because I know obviously I've got my story how I ended up there, and yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear yours.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I joined Primark in January 2013, I think it was. I had kind of got to that point. I was in second year of my undergrad where I needed a little bit of extra income. And also at the time I was looking of planning kind of a big holiday somewhere. So whether that was to like the USA, which sadly never materialized, or to go kind of traveling around Europe, which also didn't materialize until much later. I wanted just that little bit of income to support me whilst I was going through my studies. And so I looked at various jobs. I went on Indeed, LinkedIn, look at who was advertising, applied to, a multitude of retailers in Cabot, Circus and Broadmead. If people don't know, those are the two main shopping centres in the centre of Bristol. And only got replies back from Next and Primark, which just goes to show kind of how competitive the jobs market is. Went for an interview with Primark, had an online interview with Next, which, if you think about it, in 2013 kind of seems quite advanced for the time, but now, especially, in the wake of COVID, is very much the norm. Didn't really nail the online interview for Next. Didn't really do a lot wrong in the interview for Primark. The questions were fairly routine, dare I say, and was offered the job, I think, pretty much same day. And then I started, so you all know this, but for the benefit of people who are watching or listening, so I started in the fitting rooms, and you see all sorts of things in there, which some of which we probably can't discuss on a pre-Watershed podcast.
And that's a separate podcast of its own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we got reorganized, I think, because I went for a position at Primark that I didn't get, but as a kind of a training plan to work towards that position, I was then kind of taken under your wing. And we had the dream team, I suppose you could call it, of me, you, Sam and Tom, working on the first floor. And those were some really great times. We had, good work ethic between us as a team, but also we had some great banter as well, which was really, I can look back on those days and say, actually, those were really fun times.
So for the listener, that team became a lot of my examples in interviews, if I'm honest, in terms of, you're right, and I thank you for kind of that compliment, but in terms of kind of, that's how I saw it, in terms of, certainly, you were kind of given to me as, as a manager, but to kind of develop you, and I was trying to develop Sam and Tom all at the same time, in terms of that kind of domino effect of progression. And you're right, in terms of kind of, that led to a lot of examples for me in terms of interviews going forward of, so tell me about progression. Well, this is what I did with these guys. And you're right, in terms of kind of that, it was a bit of a perfect storm. We were all helping each other, but we also had, a good kind of relationship from a friendship as well. So yeah, definitely agree there.
Yeah, it was, I can look back on it and say that we worked well as a team, and I like to think that each one of the four of us brought something different to that team. And I look back on that sometimes. I catch myself kind of daydreaming, I suppose you could say, thinking about those days and thinking, God, I quite often wonder what Sam or Tom are up to, because I don't keep quite as in close touch with them as I do with yourself. But hopefully wherever they are now, they're keeping well.
Yeah. So now we're kind of into your sliding door moment around career, I guess. So, what have you got for us now?
So, I mean, this may be quite a contentious one, and I was debating whether to do it or not, but I'll go with it. So,
Okay.
I mean, if you're of a certain age and you like football, then you will all have a friend who's like, oh yeah, I had trials for West Ham, or I could have been pro if it wasn't for my dodgy knee. So apologies if what I'm going to share with you now comes across a bit like that, because it kind of is. But anyway, so when I was 16, 17, 18, I was very fortunate to be part of, so Bristol Rovers had I suppose you could call it like a satellite academy, based in Warwick, which wasn't too far from where me and my parents were living at the time. And I was very fortunate to be scouted and invited to be part of their squad, basically from pretty much from when I turned 17 until when I turned 18. So I was there for kind of about a year or so. For those who don't know me or know much about like me playing football, so I play as a goalkeeper. So I was invited to be part of their kind of goalkeeping development plan. But going back kind of even further than that, so I'd had kind of opportunities to play at decent levels. So when I was 14, so Worcester City and then Coventry City had asked me to come along for trials and development matches. And it was really kind of that I had kind of peaks and troughs with football. And the point I'm trying to get to with this is that obviously, as people will get from this podcast, I'm no longer actively involved in playing football to a high level. I still play recreationally, but that's about it. But the sliding doors moment, as I see it, is probably that when I was younger, I didn't quite realize the importance of physical fitness and also attitude with regards to trying to make yourself a career in football. There's a phrase and a mantra that I believe now, but probably I believe it a bit too late in life, which is that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Now, from the opportunities I was given when I was younger, obviously I recognized that I was quite a talented goalkeeper in my youth. But if I'm being truly honest with myself, then I probably didn't invest enough time in physical fitness, in determination. And I kind of look at, okay, so they play in different positions, but I look at people like Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling as prime examples of people who have made it to the very highest level. And that is because they have that desire to make it, and they would be out playing football, 7-8 hours a day, whether it's in the street, down the local court, or on AstroTurf. The reason why they play at the very highest level is because they had that attitude to train and make football their life. And if I'm being honest with myself, although I like playing football, I probably never would have wanted to make it my life. I don't know if you follow Ben Foster, does a fantastic YouTube channel. And if you watch, I mean, he's the goalkeeper, he's 39, 40, I think. If you look at the level of fitness training that he does in pre-season and what he has to do day in, day out every week, when I was 14, 15, 16, that really didn't appeal to me. I just wanted to play with my friends on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then the rest of the week probably just wanted to get down the pub. Yes, okay, underage, but wanted to socialize really. And it's only now that I'm a bit older, and because I do a healthcare and a clinical medicine focused career, that I understand the importance of physical health and certainly how that helps sports people to get to the very highest level, but also the determination that you need to have to succeed. And, I'm a great believer that you shouldn't carry regrets with you in life. And I'm very happy with where I am now in life. And, I look back on those times fondly, similarly to what we were talking about Primark earlier. But if I was to offer advice to any, younger listeners or aspiring footballers or any aspiring sports people out there, then I would say, to succeed at that very highest level, you have to be willing to make that sport or that profession basically your entire life. And you have to be willing to commit hours, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices to achieve what the very best can achieve. And if I'm being honest with myself, I didn't have that desire. I didn't have that willingness to physically or mentally push myself that far. But, thinking about the concept of a sliding door moment, if I had have done, then who knows? I could have ended up maybe playing for Bristol Rovers, which, as you know, I'm an ardent Bristol City fan, would have been extremely complicated. But there we go.
No, I think that's really interesting, and I think it's you're right in terms of it absolutely fits in terms of the category. I think I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I was anywhere near that, because that I wasn't. Like you say, I've always just enjoyed it recreationally, but I've certainly seen that in terms of so when I was growing up, and obviously you'll know him obviously as like you say, as a City fan. Cole Scouse lived very near to where I grew up. He went to the same school as I did, and you, like you say, that those stories kind of filtered down, I guess, to our year of how he approached things. So, like you say, as you get to 16, 18, he wasn't the one going to parties. He wasn't the one smoking at the bike sheds. He wasn't doing any of these things.
Yeah.
And then he went on to have a professional career. And then, like you say, you see those around him, and he I think it was always kind of made aware that he wasn't necessarily the most talented in our year, or the year, sorry, that he was in our school, but he put the hard work in. He didn't go and do the kind of relaxed approach, go to the parties, all these things. He stayed away from that, put the hours in, and then obviously got professional moves. He went to City and Reading, just a few off the top of my head. So you're right in terms of it is a big sliding door moment. It is a good piece of advice in terms of anything you kind of want to do. You need to put the hours in, I think, in terms of and like I say, ultimately retail wasn't for either of us, but there's some people out there that are into it and do want to make it a career, and they put the hours in. That wasn't for me. I certainly put the hours into being good at HR, or being okay at HR. I wouldn't go as far as good. And you put the hours in now into kind of your chosen career. But like you say, it's hindsight is 2020, isn't it? Of if you'd put the hours in kind of the football at that age, where could you have been now in terms of, like you say, you see similar people of your age that are out there, they are doing it, and like you say, Ben Foster is a really good example of someone who is still dedicated to it and still doing it, isn't he? And he's, like you say, he's pushing late 30s, maybe up towards 40. So you're right. I think it's a really good share, and I fully appreciate kind of what you're saying around it's about your aptitude, isn't it?
It really is. I think you hit the nail on the head there, really, mate, to be honest, in the sense of whatever I applied it to a sporting situation, but whatever your passion is in life, if it is to get up the career ladder, or if it is to invest in property, or if it is to go and travel the world, then to achieve that to the highest possible standard that you can, you have to be willing to make that your life, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices along the way. And those who hit the highest levels do make sacrifices. Obviously, sport and football was an example that I drew upon, but there are numerous other examples out there of people who have, sacrificed lots to get to the position that they ultimately are in.
Oh, definitely. So that brings us nicely onto our third and final category, and this is always the one that gives me a little bit of trepidation, because obviously it's the one I know least about, and even more so with someone I know. It seems that I know less about what you're gonna throw at me in the wild card. So it's over to you, Jim.
So I'm gonna talk about quite a personal one for the wild card one. So back in 2012, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer. So that was during my second year of university. Now, I'm very pleased to say that mum has been 5 years all clear. There's no signs of any cancer recurrence, and she is actually now retraining as a student nurse at the University of Worcester. But in terms of the nature of this podcast, I thought it was one worth discussing, because my grandma on my mum's side sadly passed away from breast cancer at a similar age to the age that my mum was diagnosed at. And that was very much due to the fact that some of the treatments, which my mum and numerous other women out there have been extremely lucky to receive, simply wasn't available in the late 80s and early 90s, which is terribly sad, but is kind of the fact of the matter, really. So my sliding door moment for the wild card really is to think, I'm extremely grateful and extremely fortunate still to have hopefully many years left with my mum. But certainly, had she not have had the wonderful treatment of the NHS, the Macmillan nurses, had she not have been, involved in cancer care in this era, had it have been, like we talked about earlier, maybe the early 90s or the late 80s or even earlier than that, there's a very real possibility that my mum wouldn't be here. And so I'm reflecting on that as a sliding door moment, that I'm very grateful that she's still here. She had, I won't go into it too much, but she was part of a clinical trial called Persephone. And that was involving kind of a fairly experimental drug at the time called Herceptin, that basically allows the body to recognize cancerous cells as being foreign. And so it kickstarts the immune system into kind of destroying the cancerous cells, but not the healthy cells, which is a lot better than kind of the previous treatment regimes, which were kind of based on things like chemotherapy or radiotherapy, where you're kind of treating the cancer, but you're also getting an awful lot of side effects as well due to the fairly terrible effects of the chemotherapy drugs. So, things like, I remember seeing my mum, had lost all of her hair because of the effect of chemotherapy. She was suffering really badly with joint pains. And it was a real roller coaster of a ride for us as a family. So we're only a family of three. So I'm an only child. There's just me, mum, and dad. And then we have fairly close contact with my granddad on my mum's side, and obviously her brother and his wife. But we are a fairly close and tight-knit family group, and it was a real shock to the system when mum was diagnosed. Now, I remember being sat in the clinic when the consultant informed her, and naturally mum was very upset. And I don't think the weight of that moment probably settled in for me until probably a good 6 months later, when mum was firmly on the treatment pathway. And so to kind of conclude this point, every day that you get with someone who is a cancer survivor is a blessing. But mum was extremely fortunate in that she obviously she examined herself quite frequently because of that family history of breast cancer, and she was also very lucky in that she had access to early mammogram screening because of the family history. But I'm sure there are a number of women out there who perhaps don't have that family history, but do find lumps or concerning features and don't know what to do about it. And part of my role now, working as both a physician associate but also a healthcare lecturer, is to try and promote things like cancer screening and promote awareness of the services that are available to patients who have that dilemma or conundrum on their hands. And I would implore anyone who listens to this podcast, it doesn't have to be breast cancer. If you have any concerning symptom, then to give your GP a call in the first instance. I know we're all finding it really hard to get GP appointments at the moment in the wake of the pandemic, but they will, having worked in a GP setting myself throughout the pandemic, they will make allowances and they will prioritize patients who have those red flag symptoms. So if you are a person who's listening to this and you're worried, then please do give your GP a call. And I thought I'd just kind of conclude by touching on, so mum was very fortunate in that she had access to early mammogram screening purely on her family history. There's clearly a number of women out there who don't have that family history, and mammogram screening in the UK is run for women between the ages of 50 to 70, 71, I think it is. But there is a clinical trial going on at the moment. It's called the Age X trial, and they're looking to see whether it's actually worth reducing the initial age of screening down to between 47 to age 49.
Okay.
And that trial started in 2009, and it's still ongoing to this day. And my hope certainly is that the outcome of that trial is a positive one, and that by dropping that age, even though it's down by a maximum of 3 years from 50 to 47, we can pick up some of those women who have those concerning features, but haven't been offered through their family history early mammography. But I mean, that was my real sliding moment. It could have quite possibly gone the other way for mum. She had a fairly aggressive form of breast cancer. But I'm ever so thankful for everything the NHS, the Macmillan team, the oncology team at the Worcester Royal Hospital have done for her.
So there's a couple of things for me there. One, obviously, it's awful that your mum went through that, but obviously I'm super glad that she's kind of out the other side, obviously, and I'm sure everyone else listening will feel the same. I think you've touched on a few kind of great things there, and if we can, we'll pick it up after the show, but we'll try and pop some links into the comments. I think, like you say, just for those listening, because obviously I'm not a woman, I'm not an expert in this in terms of some of the things you've just touched on. So I think let's where we can, we'll always kind of put some links in the comments for people that need to access things. And you're right in terms of that. I can certainly relate in terms of the everyday extra you get. So recently it was 4 years since my dad passed. He suffered for a long time with kind of heart problems, had a number of heart attacks after. So obviously it's not comparable in terms of cancer. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I've been through that or know someone who's been through that, because I don't. But that extra day mentality, I can fully get behind, because almost every time he had one, we were saying goodbye, until it got to that point where you almost were resigned to it, and then it became 7, 8, 9 heart attacks later, and that was eventually the one that got him. And I kind of sit here now 4 years on and think, but no, he got to go to so he never got to. So for those listening, he never got to meet my children, but he did get to go to my wedding. So there's photos that will live with me forever in terms of that. He got to see that moment, and so that's what I kind of refer to in that. Being able to appreciate what you're saying there around kind of appreciate every extra day. I fully get that.
Yeah, I just want to touch on a point you've made there, actually. So talking about photos, most of the people listening to this podcast will probably be doing so on a smartphone or a smart device that has a camera. And I quite often think about how we take photos at the drop of a hat now, simply because we can. But I look back to certainly my parents' era and certainly my grandparents' era, and a photo to them is, a cherished memory, because they have the physical copy of the photo. There wasn't things like, cloud computing or external hard drives that you could store thousands of pictures and memes on. A photo meant something to them. And I think that's something we've kind of lost as a society, really. And I really hope it's something that we get back. It's certainly something that we are working on as a family, is making sure that we actually print some of the pictures that we take on our smartphones, because if the smartphone gets damaged or your account gets hacked or what have you, the pictures are gone. But if you have a photo album full of actual physical copies of the photos, it's not just the pages that you're turning through, it's the memories that are captured in those pictures. And you can pick a picture up and you can look at it and you can hold it like you had with the pictures of you and your dad at your wedding, and it instantly takes you back to that moment. Whereas you can scroll through your gallery on an iPhone or an Android and you can just think, oh, that was good. And there's not that emotional connection there like there is with having, in my opinion, a physical copy of a photograph.
No, I fully agree. In terms of, it's something we have kind of strived to do, I guess, in terms of we've got an album with the wedding photos in. Obviously it's quite a traditional thing now to put it in an album, where, like you say, people have probably moved away from that in terms of it. There was a whole kind of time of it being on a DVD, and obviously at some point DVDs are going to go if if they haven't already gone, depending on kind of your opinion. So you're right. I certainly value that. Probably more old school approach, and it's something that we're trying to kind of keep with the kids, because obviously Ivy wasn't there when we got married, and so she does kind of leaf through the photo album and look at mummy in a pretty dress, and appreciates it through her eyes in a way. So yeah, I fully appreciate that. I think that's a really good shout, mate.
Yeah, I think if there's something to be taken away from how technology, I mean, we could do a whole another podcast on the merits and the evils of technology, but if there is something to be taken away from just how easy it is to capture moments in a photograph now, then I would just implore people to think, even if you just print off, say, some of your best photographs from the year. So something I did last year was I printed off 12 of my favorite photographs from the year, and I've put those into an album. I'll always have that album, heaven forbid the house burns down or someone robs me. But in years to come, I'll pick that album up, I'll open it, I'll look at the pages, I'll take the picture out. But I may not have this smartphone, and I may not have this computer that I'm talking to you on now, and I may not have a hard drive or a cloud computing account, but I'll always have that physical album, and I'll always have my recollection of those moments because of that. But that's just me.
No, I think that's a lovely way to end. So thank you, Jim, for your time. And if you can all like, share, and subscribe, thank you for your time. See you soon.
Thanks, Rob.